come back in because we're going to now switch and look at some of the Bible stories that we did at Holiday Club, and Joe's going to summarize them in a much better way than I would.
Alison, we've got a request for sellotape and I don't know where it is. Do you mind sorting that out? Thank you very much. Sorry. There it is. There's the sellotape. Okay, so my challenge at Holiday Club, perhaps because I've got the oldest group, and I was very aware this year that I'd got the group who'd done the last 2 years of their primary education disrupted, and that they were making this huge transition to secondary school. And what has a load of kings chopping people up into pieces and throwing them in lions' dens and building gold statues got to do with that kind of scenario? So my challenge is to try and say, well, what does it mean for a bunch of children whose lives have been turned upside down by COVID and who then are faced with this huge transition? But it occurred to me that Daniel and the other Hebrews were moved from the land of Judah to the land of Babylon. And when they were in Babylon, they served under a number of kings. Nebuchadnezzar, we hear about in the story, Belteshazzar, and Darius. So these Hebrews are living in a strange country. They're living in a place where the language is different. They're living in a place where the culture is different. Perhaps most significantly, they're living in a place where the religion is different. And that immediately causes me to think, well, actually, that is just as true now. It is true for all of us in that we have been living in a COVID environment, a strange alien place. It is true for you as you transfer between nursery and infant school, as you transfer between primary school and secondary school. It is true as you transfer from schooling into adulthood. And it is true for us as followers of Jesus. In one sense, we belong in this world. But in another sense, we all live in an environment that is at times strange and different, and where perhaps we feel we don't know whether we fit. And the question is, do we want to fit? Or are we happy not fitting? Is not fitting a good thing, or is not fitting a bad thing? And so I think that whether you did Holiday Club or not last week, actually, I guess we all have at times a sense of, do I fit? We all have this idea that everybody else feels like they do fit, and it's just me that feels like I don't. And some of that not fitting is good. And therefore, what I tried to do with the children this week is to investigate with them how we are distinct as those that wish to be people of God. What ways do we need to be distinct? Okay. Was that we need to distinguish between what we can accept in our world and what we can't accept. So we need to think quite carefully about what aspects of our culture is it perfectly okay to embrace, and what aspects of our culture can we not embrace. I guess particularly, I'm aware of the fact that there's a number of people around me who are not living in the country of their birth, for whom the UK is a strange and alien place where things are different. And what of life in the UK can you accept? And what of life in the UK do you need to say no to? Daniel and his Hebrews accepted their name changes. It's interesting to me that there's no record of them kicking up a fuss about that. They obviously decided that was not essential, I think. Yeah? So that, and I can imagine your name is quite dear to you, and somebody's saying, no, you're not going to be called, oh crikey, I've now forgotten Daniel's new name. Bell, what's his name? Yeah, that's the one. They accepted it. There's also evidence that Daniel and the Hebrews built good relationships with the alien people that they were with where possible. Yeah, there's plenty of evidence that their agenda was not to remove themselves completely from their new environment. There's plenty of evidence that they were trying, where possible, to build good relationships. So right at the beginning, Daniel asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself, and God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. He asked for permission. And he had built a good enough relationship with that official that that official wanted to show favor and compassion. So even if you're alongside people who don't think the same as you, who don't follow your belief systems, who do not perhaps work in the way you would want them to work, alongside other children who do not play perhaps in the way that your family plays, where possible, we build good relationships. There is a lot of evidence in the Daniel stories that Hebrews worked hard, and they worked hard over a sustained period of time. It says, the king found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. That may well be part of your witness. And it is over a sustained period of time, because Daniel so distinguished himself that the king set him over the whole kingdom. And that's 3 kings later. This wasn't a flash in the pan, let's sweeten them up. This was a sustained period of wise, faithful, hard work for a kingdom that fundamentally he did not agree with. So those of you in workplaces where there are some things about that workplace that you find unpalatable, there is evidence of sustained, loyal, faithful, wise, hard work here. And that earns them respect. So these strange Hebrews who've been moved into a different environment, and in many respects a substandard environment, do earn respect. So when we've got this weird dream, it's the queen, the widow of Nebuchadnezzar, who says there is a man who was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom. She has lodged in the back of her mind about Daniel. And when her son is in a fix, she remembers this Daniel who was known to have insight and intelligence and wisdom. So she's earned respect. I hope you can see that these things are just as relevant now as they are in the Babylonian exile. So the need to earn respect. However, there is plenty of evidence that they also had an ability to know what is not negotiable and to prepare for the consequences. And there's some lovely craft work there, paper cup fiery furnaces. Whoever invented LED tea lights has transformed craft for lots of church groups, because all of a sudden you can do light without setting light to everything. So they knew what was not negotiable, and they prepared for the consequences. So when faced with the fiery furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say, "The God we serve is able to deliver us from you and your flaming furnace. But even if he does not, we want you to know, Your Majesty, respect there, even when you are flat disagreeing and refusing to follow a command, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Children are busy developing images of gold. The reason you are developing them in mosaics, children, little squares, is to remind you that they do fall apart. Yes? Okay. So while you are building your images of gold, actually you're building them from little bits that will fall apart. But Daniel and us are called to know what is not negotiable and prepare for the consequences. And that's hard. Knowing what we can go along with and what we cannot go along with. Because there is a higher throne. There is someone who is above all kings. And there's the fiery furnace. Had that fiery furnace ended in death for Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, had it ended in them being incinerated in that fiery furnace, that would have been their gateway to heaven. That would have been the moment at which they fully entered into the presence of God.
Oh, yes. Now, again, I was asking those people that had helped with Holiday Club what's the thing that they most struck them during the week. And Casey, for her, it was this picture of, so there's 4 people inside the fiery furnace. That's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But there's a 4th person in the furnace. Seems to me that this is the heart of the Christian faith. Ours is seems to me, a messy faith. It's not just that God comes in, makes everything absolutely perfect, and that we all live happily ever after. Well, there's an element to which that's the truth. So that sounds a bit like Easter. But the reason why there's a cross at the front of our church building is because it's the broken body of Jesus that we share. It's the Jesus who is inside the fiery furnace. So whatever scary or difficult place or situation that you find, the thing that Casey learnt last week is no harm will come to us if God is with us. Now, that's a very profound statement, that I believe that what Casey's saying now is that it's no eternal harm. There will be times in life where there is physical harm, and actually death will come to us. But it will be okay, because Jesus will be there in our death and will be there to raise us up. And one of the things, again, in Casey's emails that she said was that the children understood who that fourth figure was. And actually, the primary school age children getting the fact that that's what Christian faith is there's a fourth person in the furnace with you. Okay, and that's strange good news, but it's the only good news that we've got. That whatever fiery furnaces we face, Jesus is with us. The other one came from Lindsay. Do you want to say this, or shall I? I mean, it's a very similar idea that God is with us and is working in every situation, no matter how dire it looks. And that there's the eye of faith to see what's going on. I remind you back to Nina saw something last week that at the time I wasn't seeing it. And it's the same thing we were looking at. And that if you look at from God's perspective, there is stuff being worked out that maybe we don't see working out. That's what I think. I'm not sure whether Lindsay, that's as far as but anyway, that there is something very profound in that. Actually, just in terms of metaphors, I mean, I haven't actually included anything that so far in the service that I learned just in the slides, but there's that is a brilliant picture of what's going on. For me, the picture, one of the pictures that I liked that last week was that I get volunteers from teenagers who are happy for children to throw water at them and for me to chuck a bucket of water at them. So I'm standing there chucking buckets of water at teenagers. And at the end of the session where that's taken place, a child comes up to me and says, Nick, why is your t-shirt wet? Because she said, did I miss it? Did somebody chuck a bucket of water at you? And I said, no, nobody chucked water at me. But when I was chucking water at other people, it bounced back and I got soaked. And I think that works with goodness, that if you chuck out goodness, it does bounce back. And I think it's also true of if you're being nasty and you're chucking a bucket of water to somebody who hasn't given you permission, very important. And I did stress the points to the children, that all of the children that had actually given me permission and had said, yes, they're happy for me to chuck water at them. But if somebody hasn't and you're chucking water and being nasty, it comes back on you. And I felt that that was a profound picture of the way life is. And I think the child that I was speaking to said, oh yeah, I get that. And it's beautiful, the fact that some kids really got this image. Okay, just one other person sharing, Alison from, this is the next story in Daniel about the lion's den, and this is what Alison learned from it.
Well, Daniel in the lion's den, one of the most popular ones, I think. But as Nick was sharing in the morning about how we're going to share this with our groups, it came to me that Daniel was rescued, but he wasn't rescued straight away. God was with him in the lion's den, but he did shut the mouths of the lions, but he had to stay in the lion's den for the whole night. Sometimes our situations stay the same. We ask for God to rescue us, and he will, but we have to stay for the night. Sometimes our night can be very long. Sometimes it could even last for years. But the mouths of the lions, I asked the children to roar. I think 5-year-olds can roar very loudly. And I asked them to roar with their mouths shut, like the lions. But they could still roar, very quietly though. And we can, our troubles and that are still around us. but we can know God's peace, and rescue does come in the morning, whether that's the morning of resurrection or the morning of one of our days. Rescue will come in the morning. Nick asked if we could choose a song, and I've got a friend in me. One of the little boys that I knew when they were born prematurely, two twins. He said one of the twins that was born prematurely and quite poorly was in our group, and he said this was his favourite song. I have changed a few words. It should say, "Just remember what your old pal said," but I've changed it to Saviour, because this is what Jesus is saying to us. So as we sing this, it's Jesus saying this to us. You've got your troubles, but I'm here for you. There isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. Just stick by me and we'll see it through, because you've got a
So this was one for me, really, because this is not something I find easy. There are times when being direct is right. So Daniel seems to spend quite a lot of time working hard, keeping his head down, just going with the flow in a very good and right way. But then there is the moment when Daniel, asked by the king to interpret a dream, says, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Seems to me important that it was in response to the king's request. But at that point, Daniel does not pull his punches, does he? God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end, which is what happens that night. Overwhelmingly, it seems as if these Hebrews, in a strange place, do not abandon the practice of prayer and do not abandon the practice of private prayer and joining with others to pray. So in a dire fix, where Daniel has been asked to interpret a dream where he doesn't even know what the content of the dream was, it's ridiculous in one sense. Daniel goes to the other Hebrews and he urges them to pray that God, who rules from heaven, will be merciful and will provide the interpretation of this dream, which indeed he does. But it isn't just in a dire fix that Daniel prays. This prayer builds on a regular pattern. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to God, just as he had done before. So that's my 7 things that I believe have got nothing specifically to do with a Babylonian exile nearly 3,000 years ago. That wherever we are in circumstances where we need to be true to who we are and what we believe, but we also need to be effective, and we also need to be able to build relationships. We distinguish between what we can accept and what we cannot accept. We build good relationships with people where possible. We work hard over a sustained period of time to earn respect. We have the wisdom to know what is not negotiable, and at that point, to be prepared for the consequences. To be prepared to be direct at the right time. And in order to do 1 to 6, to pray and to get others to do so.
Okay, and quite a long way through the slides, it says, may each of us know the blessing of Jesus being the center of our lives. May each of us know the blessings of joy, thoughtfulness, of patience, of faithfulness, generosity, the blessing of goodness, the blessing of unity, and the blessing of peace, today and every day, forever. Amen.
Amen.